to one another. Psychologists speculate that the transaction served to fulfill Leopold's masochistic fantasies, and in return he gave Loeb company in his consistent criminal escapades. Loeb was immensely jealous, and Leopold inexplicably insecure. Both were united in their understanding that their pleasures superseded moral codes and laws. After their raid on an old fraternity yielded menial possessions and $80, they turned their sights towards a more attention-grabbing and violent crime. In the winter of 1924, this murderous duo planned a kidnapping for hours. They correlated what they arrogantly thought was a perfect crime, a $10,000 ransom thrown out of the window of a train, snatched up quickly, followed by their unidentifiable escape. On the evening of May 21st, 1924, after driving around in search of victims and nearly abandoning the prospect of achieving their criminal plan, Loeb spotted his second cousin, Bobby Franks, returning down the road from a baseball game. The 14-year-old got invited to take a ride around the block by Loeb, who knew that the boy's rich father could easily pay the ransom. The unsuspecting boy got into the front seat with Leopold when Loeb felt around for the blunt chisel he had taped up his sleeve to subdue the kidnappee. He smashed it into the boy's head repeatedly, hoping to knock him unconscious. Still, arms raised, Bobby fought for his life. Loeb shoved a rag deep into the boy's throat and taped his mouth. He left a deadly gash on his forehead. The perfection in the brutality of this crime was that Leopold and Loeb had thrown out a typewriter that they had used to write the ransom note. What they did next, simply for the adrenaline rush of it, was appalling. To dispose of the body, they doused it with acid, shoved it into a culvert, and left it in a deserted field in Indiana. When Bobby's parents got the literate ransom note, he had already been dead many hours, and investigations were underway. Bobby's mercilessly slain body would be found the next morning. later incriminated Leopold for the crime. To add fuel to the fire, the Leopold family chauffeur, trying to exonerate Leopold, instead proved that Leopold was lying to the police by claiming that the car which was used for driving around girls had been in the garage the whole time. The police pressure on the duo grew until they both confessed, not acting much like lovers when placing the blame on each other for the murder. Leopold would beg Loeb to accept responsibility, since he maintained that Loeb had attacked the boy, but Loeb would tell him, "Mopsy feels less terrible than she might, thinking you did it, and I'm not going to take that shred of comfort away from her." This case got the attention that can only be described in the modern terms as a media circus. Droves upon droves of people attended the trial and the sentencing. The odd debacle that ensued during the court would be narrated by producers, personal accounts and books in the later years. Influential lawyer Clarence Darrow performed his historic speech against the death penalty during this case. While it sounded like rambling, it convinced the judge, who already opposed the death penalty, to reduce the sentence to life in prison. This went against the wishes of the outraged masses calling for death. Many observers of the American legal system expressed frustration at the prospect of an affluent white lawyer attempting to exonerate two wealthy white boys. Darrow called this the affluenza disease and withdrew attention from the narcissistic pursuits of his clients to their background and upbringing, claiming that the two had been sexually abused, physically disciplined, and psychologically affected because of their childhood. Darrow used ridiculous Freudian motives and psychologies to get around the facts of the case. He wasn't very successful in issuing a lesser sentence, but his antics in court became a thing of legend. Leopold and Loeb, in a packed courtroom and frenzied people surrounding the area, were sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 99 years. 12 years after his arrest, in January 1936, Loeb was killed in a razor fight with a fellow inmate who claimed that Loeb had made sexual advances towards him. Leopold retained some of his conscience and was released after services to the community and good behaviour in 1958 after 34 years of imprisonment. He wrote a book while applying for parole, a memoir called Life Plus 99 Years. Famed poet Carl Sandburg, who maintained a correspondence with him, testified for him in court. Leopold wanted himself reincarnated as a human being. He put his genius to good use by teaching fellow prisoners, reforming the prison's library, and adding 18 more languages